I'm the drilling engineer on Arctic rig, and we have some strange rules. They call me Overseer Davies now, though I started like any other thaw hand on the ice. 30 years drilling in the Arctic Circle does things to a man. Numbness settles in, not just in your fingers battling frozen valves, but deeper in the bone. I'm putting it all down now, before the ice claims me for good, a guide of sorts. Not for the veterans, they're already ghosts in the machine, but for the fresh meat shivering off the transport choppers. Crystal 07 isn't kind to fools, and if my words can save one soul from the deep freeze, then scratching this out will be worth the ache in my joints. The corporate bio paints me as a resource optimization specialist. Truth is, I was running a failing garage in Birmingham before the recruiters found me. Fixing engines is fixing engines, whether it's a combustion block or a kilometer-long drill string. But the Arctic isn't metal and grease, it's something ancient, something that watches. The sea called to me too, in its way, a promise of escape, of something beyond the mundane. I answered, and like a fool, I thought I understood the question. I'm not a poet, never claimed to be. Give me schematics, pressure readings, thermal tolerances, that's my language. I like my coffee black as crude, my layers breathable, and my silence unbroken. No use for boardroom jargon or hydroponic gardens they install on these new generation rigs. Give me the grind of the drill bit, the groan of the ice sheet, and the cold, hard certainty that you're standing between civilization and something that wants to stay buried. Running an Arctic rig isn't about profit margins, it's about containment. It demands focus, discipline, and the willingness to stare into an abyss that stares right back. Believe me, the ice has eyes. Most of my life's been spent under a sky that's either perpetual night or a sun that circles but never warms. Routine becomes your god out here. There's a grim comfort in the shift rotation, the crackle of comms checks, the rhythmic pulse of the generators fighting the cold. But the flip side is always there, the creeping dread. Isolation isn't just geographic, it's cellular. The quiet isn't empty, it's listening. You learn to live inside that silence, or it hollows you out. Most don't last. Crystal 07. They call it a marvel of engineering, a fortress against the elements. It's a steel spider perched on a frozen ocean, officially Sector 4, Barents Sea. Though the ice drift shifts us constantly, company likes to keep it vague. This rig has seen storms that would shatter lesser vessels, ice quakes that split the seabed. She holds. She has to. The men and women aboard were just echoes in her steel bones. Expendable echoes. Crew turnover is, significant. Some crack in weeks, some in days. Records 11 hours, Greenhorn Tech from Oslo. Tried to walk back to shore. Shore's 300 miles south through a blizzard, across shifting ice. Darwin Award winner in waiting. Life here isn't for everyone. The labor's brutal, the weather's actively hostile. And the ice is beautiful, yes, in its way. A diamond shroud over a tomb. But it's a jailer, not a jewel. Remember that. When you arrive, they'll give you a data chip, encased in bioceramic. Looks like a dog tag cold against your skin. They'll tell you it's for access, for tracking vital signs, for emergency protocols. Partly true, but it's more than that. Much more. You'll learn. The rig functions under specific parameters. Officially, Polar Extraction Dynamics owns us. Shell company Labyrinth ends somewhere in Reykjavik, then vanishes. Before you even set foot on the helipad, you'll digitally sign a dozen NDAs. Standard corporate boilerplate, they say. But the protocols, the real rules, they're whispered, passed down shift to shift, fragmented warnings becoming ingrained reflex. This guide, this is to bridge the gaps, to tell you what the ice and steel won't. Carelessness here isn't just frowned upon. It's a death sentence. Men have been lost, swallowed by the ice, crushed by machinery, driven mad by the dark. And some vanish into places the drills shouldn't reach. Forces operate beneath this ice. Forces older than nations, colder than space. I've witnessed things that defy every engineering principle. heard accounts from men with eyes like frosted glass that would freeze the blood in your veins. But slow breaths, one step at a time. Maybe, just maybe, you'll survive your rotation. Life on Crystal 07 is a controlled slide towards entropy. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Wake cycle begins before dawn, if you can call it dawn in perpetual twilight. Suit up in thermals and polymers, and head to your station. Some days, you're down in the core library, logging samples, praying the permafrost seals haven't cracked. Other days, you're topside, battling ice accretion on the comms array, praying the wind doesn't rip you off the platform. Physical, grinding work, lungs burning with recycled air, skin itching under layers. By shift's end, muscles scream, clothes stink of ozone and recycled sweat. But there's a brutal satisfaction in it, a primal reassurance that you're still here. The nutrient paste helps too. Hydroprotein slurry, they call it. Tastes vaguely of algae and despair. Rigs I've worked before, you'd be lucky to get flavored cardboard. Crystal 07, they push the paste through flavor injectors. Arctic berry, glacier mint, synthetic salmon. Lies, all lies. But it's warm, calorie-dense, keeps you moving. Once a week, morale boost allocation. Dehydrated protein bars, taste like sawdust and chemical regret. Small mercies out here are magnified. You learn to crave the flicker of a heat lamp, the hum of the recycling system, the brief mandated silence of sleep cycle. The aurora displays are another concession to sanity. When solar flares hit right, the sky bleeds color. Emerald, violet, impossible crimson. Slick propaganda vids call it Arctic majesty. Out here, you see it for what it is. Thin veils over infinite black, cold light dancing on a frozen grave. The ice reflects it, fractured and distorted. And for a moment, the rig doesn't feel so much like a machine, but a cage suspended in something vast and hungry. The rig itself is a symphony of groans and shudders, the constant grind of the drills, the whine of hydraulics, the ice sheet protesting every ton of steel. At first it's a hammer to the skull. Sleep becomes a battle. Most of us mainline soporifics to shut it out. But over time the noise becomes white noise, part of the background radiation of survival. You stop hearing it until it stops. And when it stops, that's when you listen. But you didn't sign up for a brochure on Arctic living, did you? You're here for the whispers, the stories that curdle in the recycled air, and I've got ice-etched journals full of them. Things you'll swear are delirium, stress fractures in the mind. Hell, if I hadn't logged the readings, seen the data spikes, I'd call myself a liar. But they're real, these things, and if you have any sense left, you'll memorize them. Out here, the ice doesn't just hold you, it tests you. And sometimes it peels back the surface and shows you what's breathing beneath. Let's start with the tremors. Every so often the rig shudders. Not from icequakes, not from stress fractures in the platform. Deeper, subsonic vibrations that resonate in your teeth, in your marrow. At first you'll dismiss them as geological stress, deep ice settling, standard rig procedure, but you need to pay attention. Log the times, the intensity, the duration. Don't just file the reports, study them. Because these tremors, they aren't natural, not anymore. They started subtly, years back, barely registering on the seismographs, dismissed as background noise. But they've grown, frequency shifting, intensity spiking. Now, they're strong enough to rattle unsecured equipment, to set teeth on edge across the mess hall. And the animals react. Seals haul out onto the ice, frantic, disoriented. Birds veer away from the rig in panicked flocks. Even the deep sea sensors pick up. Disturbances, pressure fluctuations, thermal vents opening and closing in impossible patterns. Something down there is stirring. And it doesn't like being woken up. One greenhorn, fresh out of geophysics, thought he was clever. Decided to run an unauthorized deep scan during off-cycle. Just to see what's causing the anomalies, Overseer, he chirped, all eager and clueless. We told him to scrub the data, file a miscalibration report, forget he ever saw it. But curiosity, that's a fast-acting frostbite out here. Later that week, during a tremor spike, he was down in the core library, alone. We found him hours later, slumped over a sample tray, eyes wide open, pupils blown, skin cold as vacuum-sealed rations. Data chip was fried. Brain activity flatline. Cause of death: cardiac arrest, exacerbated by pre-existing arrhythmia. Official verdict: unofficially, he looked like he'd seen something that unsaw him right back. Then there are the boreholes. We drill deep here, kilometers down, past the permafrost, past the methane hydrates, into the Precambrian bedrock. That's where the pay dirt is, the ancient reservoirs of fossil fuels. But sometimes the drill comes back, changed. Not physically damaged, no stress fractures in the bit, no equipment malfunctions. Just different, colder, covered in a frost that shouldn't exist at those depths. Ice crystals forming in vacuum. You'll only see it on certain shifts, when the core samples are pulled and logged. The drill bit, usually warm from friction, will be sheathed in a rime of impossible ice, radiating a cold that bites through thermal gloves. At first, you might think it's equipment malfunction, coolant leak, but the readings are always nominal. Systems green across the board. And then you'll notice the residue, not just ice. Embedded in the frost, microscopic filaments, black as void, arranged in patterns that shouldn't be patterns, geometric, crystalline, impossibly precise. It's the geometry that unsettles you. Euclidean, fractal, hinting at dimensions that shouldn't intersect with ours, like looking at blueprints of a building that can't exist in three-dimensional space. Some of the texts, those with backgrounds in esoteric fields, they whisper about non-Euclidean geometries, impossible topologies. They see patterns in the frost residue that mirror symbols, glyphs from languages no human tongue ever spoke. We don't encourage that line of thinking. Paranoia is contagious in the cold. So if you're on core sample duty and you see the frost bit drill bit, don't touch it barehanded. Don't try to scrape off the residue. Log the anomaly, bag the bit, quarantine the sample. Treat it like a biohazard, because in a way it is. It's a warning, a bleed-through from somewhere else. The ice gives, the ice takes, and sometimes it coughs up things that should have stayed frozen in time. Enough of that for now. There's a long rotation ahead, and you need to acclimate to the pressure. Life on the rig might seem routine at first, a clockwork of shifts and protocols, but it's not long before the anomalous, the impossible starts to seep into the steel seams. And when it does, you'd better be calibrated to recognize it. The ice is full of secrets, some geological in a different sense. I don't have answers for all of it, hell, any of it. But I've logged enough data, seen enough deviations to know this. The less you disturb the depths, the longer you breathe recycled air. There are shifts out here when the ice groans in ways that aren't natural expansion or tectonic shift. Deep, resonant moans that vibrate through the rig's substructure, like something vast and ancient shifting in its sleep. No seismic signature, no pressure fluctuations. Just sound. Impossible sound. But then, just when the dread starts to solidify in your chest, you'll see something that almost soothes. Ice blink. Sunlight refracting off the endless ice sheet, creating phantom horizons. Shimmering mirages of warmth in the desolate expanse. Beautiful, yes, deceptively so. When you're marooned hundreds of miles from land, surrounded by frozen ocean and whispers in the steel, you learn to distrust beauty like that. One of the shifts that still chills me to the bone happened during my first rotation. Green as sea ice, eager to prove myself, probably too eager. Finished my core logging, decided to take a visual inspection of the lower deck perimeter. Against protocol, of course, but protocol felt flimsy that night. The air hung heavy, static charge prickling the hairs on my arms. Aurora borealis flickering like dying embers across the sky. Leaned against the railing, activated my thermal optics, scanned the ice sheet. Black as pitch beyond the rig's floodlights. But after a while, I noticed movement. Subtle shifts in the thermal readings on the ice surface. Faint heat signatures, radiating from places where there should be only frozen silence. At first I thought it was heat bleed from the rig's substructure, thermal vents venting into the ice, but that didn't track. The patterns were too organic, too dispersed. They didn't radiate from fixed points. They pulsed, like something breathing beneath the ice. I stared at the thermal display, paralyzed until a cold dread iced my spine. The sky above was choked with aurora, magnetic interference distorting comms, sensor readings erratic. There weren't any heat vents on the perimeter deck. That was when I realized they weren't vents, they were eyes. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scattered across the ice, thermal irises glowing in the darkness, all watching the rig. My breath hitched, my optics slipped from numb fingers. Don't remember much after that, just the frantic scramble back inside, the clang of the thermal hatch sealing behind me. Took weeks to look at a thermal scan again without feeling phantom eyes burning into my retinas. Even now, decades later, I avoid perimeter checks during aurora storms. You never know what's looking back from under the ice veil. That wasn't the last impossible thing I've logged out here. Far from it. The ice has a way of exfoliating the rational mind, leaving raw nerve exposed to the elements. One of the constants that claws at the edges of sanity is the icebreaker. Every long rotation crew knows about it, even if they refuse to speak its name aloud. It only manifests during whiteout conditions, when the world shrinks to a radius of blowing snow and the rig itself becomes an island in a blizzard. You'll be topside, battling wind shear to secure sensor arrays, clearing ice accretion from the emergency beacons, and then, through the swirling white, you'll see it. A colossal shape, moving against the blizzard's grain. It looks like an icebreaker, yes, in silhouette. High prow, reinforced hull, running lights cutting through the snow squall. But it's too big. Vastly too big. And it moves with an unnatural silence, a gliding motion that defies ice resistance. No engine roar, no grinding of hull against ice. And you never see a wake. No displacement in the snowdrift, no churned ice, just passage. The first time I saw it, I wrote it off as weather distortion, snow blindness playing tricks on the optic nerve. Maybe a rogue iceberg, radar ghost, atmospheric anomaly. But when I glanced at the faces of the veterans beside me, faces carved from permafrost and silence, I saw the same recognition in their eyes. They saw it too. We didn't speak. Out here, some things are best left unvoiced. But in the recycled air, the unspoken thought hung heavy. The Leech. You won't find the Leech in any shipping manifests. No record of a vessel matching its description in any Arctic registry. It's a phantom, a ghost ship of the ice flows, legend whispered in hushed tones during sleep cycles. They say it's a bioship, a living vessel grown from something ancient that sleeps beneath the ice. Some say it's a predator, drawn to the rig's thermal signature, feeding on something we can't comprehend. Others whisper it's a warning, a harbinger of deeper intrusions. Whatever the truth, the stories always end the same. The Leech is drawn to Crystal 07 and its passage leaves vacancies. Long rotation crews have learned to fear the whiteout, not just for the storm's fury, but for what the blizzard might conceal. So when the whiteout descends and the comms crackle with static, and through the swirling snow, you see that impossible shape moving against the wind, you don't raise the alarm. You don't signal. You sure as hell don't try to approach. You keep your head down, secure your station, and pray it passes. It always does. Eventually. There's one protocol on Crystal 07, etched deeper than steel, colder than vacuum. Never descend to sub-level 7 during a red alert. You might not even see the alert cycle during your rotation. They're rare, thank God. But when it triggers, the rig transforms. Emergency klaxons blare, blast doors seal, automated lockdown protocols engage, and sub-level 7 becomes forbidden. It's not marked on the schematics, not officially. Below the core library, below the geothermal regulators, deeper than any authorized personnel are cleared to access. There's sub-level 7. They say it was part of the original rig design, a contingency measure, a Sacrificial chamber. Nobody knows for sure. The blueprints are redacted, the historical logs corrupted. If a red alert initiates, do yourself a mercy. Seal your station, engage emergency lockdown, and stay the hell away from sub-level 7 access points. Don't even think about the override codes. Don't linger near the maintenance hatches. The longer you hesitate, the more the pull intensifies. And curiosity on Crystal Leo 7 is a rapid onset cryogenic madness. The last soul to disregard red alert protocol. Name was Olsen. Geothermal tech, quiet type, always tinkering with the regulators, mumbling about efficiency matrices. Been on Crystal for almost a year when the red alert sirens ripped through the rig. Icequake tremor, massive scale, structural integrity compromised. Everyone to lockdown, automated systems engaging. But Olsen had been recalibrating the sub-level 6 regulators. Access point near the sub-level 7 maintenance hatch. He didn't evacuate, didn't respond to comms, just vanished. Rig lockdown lasted for days, structural engineers battling to stabilize the platform. When red alert lifted, Olsen was gone. No trace. Maintenance logs showed sub-level 7 hatch cycled open, then sealed again during the alert. No unauthorized access recorded. Just vacancy. Weeks later, during a routine ice sheet stress test, a remotely operated submersible drone picked up something beneath the rig's substructure. Distorted thermal signature, non-biological, vaguely humanoid in outline. Company scrubbed the footage, filed it as equipment malfunction. But the veterans, we know what they found. We know what Olsen became. I wasn't always protocol compliant. Green rotations breed arrogance. Thought I knew better, thought the rules were for the sheep, not the wolves. So, one shift, when the red alert sirens wailed, icequake tearing at the rig's foundations, I decided to see for myself what lay beyond sub-level 7. Stupidity, pure and frozen. Knew it even as I punched in the emergency override code, the access hatch hissing open. The hatch was heavy, vacuum sealed, groaning like a tomb door unsealing. Beyond it, a maintenance tunnel, angled sharply downwards, deeper than any schematic indicated. The air grew colder with every step I took, recycled air replaced by something else. Something stale, ancient, faintly metallic. The rig's hum faded, replaced by a low, resonant thrumming that vibrated in my teeth. Reached the tunnel's end, found myself before a reinforced blast door, triple-bolted, access panel dark. No manual override, no visible entry point, just cold steel and the oppressive thrumming. The whole sub-level felt submerged, not in water, but in pressure, in silence, in something beyond human comprehension. No other exits, no discernible purpose for this sub-level, just the blast door barring entry into what? And the access tunnel behind me, leading back to the dying echoes of the red alert, didn't linger long. The longer I stood there, the more I felt like an intrusion, like I was standing on the threshold of something that resented my presence. Retraced my steps, sealed the access hatch, purged the override logs. Never spoke of it. Next cycle, the red alert protocols were revised. Sub-level 7 access sealed permanently. Override codes purged from the system, maintenance hatches welded shut. I've seen red alerts trigger a handful of times since. Icequakes, rogue pressure spikes, sensor anomalies. Every time I give sub-level 7 a wide, silent berth. Don't know what would have happened if I'd tried to force that blast door, or worse, if the red alert had cycled while I was still down there, trapped in the unmapped depths. That's the thing about Crystal 07. You can't trust the steel to protect you. It contains, yes, but it also conceals. I don't know why sub-level 7 exists. Don't know who designed it, what purpose it was meant to serve. Maybe it's a relic from the original drilling platform, a forgotten contingency from a time when they understood less and feared more. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Something not built by human hands. Whatever it is, it's not for us to unlock. All we can do is maintain the seals, respect the protocols and pray the red alert sirens stay silent. Then there's the observation dome, not the main deck viewing platform. Deeper, sub-level 4, designated atmospheric research, officially for monitoring ice sheet albedo and atmospheric particulate levels. Unofficially, it's the watchtower. The dome's been sealed off for years, access restricted to level 4 clearance and above. Not locked. Keypad entry, override protocols readily available. But no one goes inside. It's a pressurized bubble of reinforced polymer, panoramic view of the ice sheet, heated seats, sensor arrays humming softly. Luxury by Crystal 07 standards. But it's been avoided. Untouched. Like a memorial to something best left undisturbed. Thing is, the original atmospheric research team, they vanished. Clean sweep. One shift logging data, calibrating sensors. Next shift, empty station. No distress calls, no equipment malfunctions, no emergency beacon activations. Just absence. Search teams combed sub-level 4, scanned the dome, reviewed security logs. Nothing. Vanished into recycled air. That was long rotations ago. The dome incident, they call it now, hushed tone reference during shift briefings. I've queried the veterans, pried for details, tried to piece together the sequence of events from redacted incident reports. No one knows, or if they do, protocol dictates silence. All they'll say is the research team was dedicated, meticulous, pushing the boundaries of atmospheric sampling. And then, one shift, they weren't there. The dome stays sealed now, not out of superstition, officially structural integrity concerns, but out of collective unease. At least, that's the official narrative. But that's not the unsettling part. During polar night cycles, when the rig plunges into weeks of perpetual darkness, some of the long rotation crew swear they've seen figures in the observation dome. Silhouettes against the panoramic viewport, spectral outlines shifting in the sensor array glow, always positioned at the main viewport, facing outwards, towards the endless ice sheet. If you use enhanced optics, boost the magnification, you'll see details. Thermal contours resolving into humanoid shapes. Multiple figures, indistinct but undeniably present. The first time I heard the rumors, I dismissed it as isolation psychosis, shared hallucination fueled by sleep deprivation and recycled air. Ghost stories to spook the greenhorns. Then I saw them myself. Polar night cycle, rig cloaked in darkness, generator hum the only constant. Routine sensor check, sub-level 4 perimeter scan. Glanced at the observation dome viewport, purely reflexive. Initially thought it was sensor feedback, thermal ghosting on the polymer. But then I saw them. Multiple silhouettes clustered at the viewport, faint thermal signatures against the cold vacuum of space. Didn't know why. Instinct, maybe just ingrained protocol. I keyed my comms, voice barely a whisper. Atmospheric research team, status check. Static crackled in my earpiece. No response, just silence. And the spectral figures in the viewport, unmoving, unblinking, staring out into the endless Arctic night. Stood there for a frozen eternity, logic warring with primal dread. Then, slowly, deliberately, I backed away, sealed the sub-level 4 access hatch. Didn't return to that deck for the rest of the rotation. That's the protocol. If you observe anomalies in the observation dome during polar night, log the sighting, file a level 3 anomaly report, and disengage. Do not attempt direct communication. Do not initiate visual contact. Do not return to sub-level 4 for the remainder of your shift cycle. Crew consensus is varied. Some believe it's a residual energy imprint of the original research team, a temporal echo trapped in the polymer viewport. Others whisper it's something else drawn to the dome, mimicking human form, observing us. Whatever the truth, rotations have ended prematurely after dome sightings. Equipment malfunctions, personnel reassignments, convenient excuses for rapid evacuation. The dome incident remains unresolved, unspoken. I've taken to redirecting power flow to sub-level 4 during polar night cycles. Minimal drain, barely registers on the energy grid, but it plunges the observation dome into absolute darkness, sensor arrays offline, viewport obscured by internal frost. Superstition? Maybe. Pragmatism? Possibly. My grandfather was a lighthouse keeper. Old tales of appeasing the sea with light and shadow ingrained in the blood. The power reroute is my offering, I suppose. A gesture of deference to something beyond understanding. Don't know if it works, don't know if it matters, but it settles something in the gut, a primal unease that hums beneath the recycled air. I've only logged dome sightings a handful of times over rotations, and each time it's the same. Spectral figures at the viewport, silent, watchful, waiting for something or someone. If you're calibrated for survival, you'll follow protocol. If you observe dome anomalies, log it, report it, and walk away. Don't seek answers in the dark. Don't invite attention from the watchers in the ice. That's all I'm logging on the observation dome. You'll have to calibrate your own fear response. Finally, there are the bioceramic chips. Every soul assigned to Crystal 07 gets one on arrival. Cold disc size of a credit chit, encased in smooth gray bioceramic. Company logo etched on one side, serial number laser etched on the other. Officially, they're personnel IDs, access keys, vital sign monitors, emergency beacons. Standard corporate issue, they claim. But like everything out here, the official narrative is a thin ice sheet over a deep, dark ocean. The chips are resonators, frequency keys attuned to something deeper than the drill's reach. Certain chips resonate with certain frequencies, unlocking access to areas not on any schematic, zones sealed off from human presence, buried deep within the rig's substructure. These aren't maintenance corridors or storage lockers. These are resonant chambers. No one speaks of what lies beyond those resonant doors, and no one calibrated for survival wants to know. There's a cold dread that emanates from those sealed zones, a psychic frostbite that chills the marrow even through steel bulkheads. And then there's what lies beneath Crystal 07. We don't know what it is, only that it's vast. Vaster than the rig itself, ancient beyond geological timescale, breathing in rhythms that predate carbon-based life. It's not actively hostile, not yet anyway, but it's aware. Sometimes when the rig groans, when the ice sheet cracks, when the tremors resonate through the substructure, you can't tell if it's structural stress or something else. Stirring in the abyssal depths, exhaling subsonic sighs that vibrate the steel bones of our cage. Whatever it is, you don't want to attract its attention. You don't want to breach the resonant seals. That's why we wear the chips. They're not just IDs, they're dampeners. Resonance inhibitors shielding us from its awareness. At least that's the ingrained belief. But the chips do more than just shield us from the deep resonance. They also tether us. In case of platform breach, catastrophic structural failure, complete system collapse, and believe me, out here, if is always when, the chip is your anchor. Your last desperate tether to something. It doesn't happen often, platform breach. Icequakes are predictable, structural stress is manageable, system failures are usually contained. But when it happens, it's a system-wide cascade, and it's something you log in your memory banks, etched in cryogenic dread. Seen it once in 30 years, one platform breach during a polar vortex event, winds exceeding structural tolerances, ice sheet fracturing under stress. Rig buckled, alarms screamed, automated lockdown failed, chaos erupted. Crew scrambling for evacuation pods, emergency beacons failing, comms grid collapsing. And then, the ice breached. Not a crack, not a fissure, a rupture. Seabed split open beneath the rig's substructure, abyssal pressure forcing frozen methane and primordial brine upwards. The rig tilted, shuddered, began to slide into the chasm. And from the depths, something resonated. A frequency, a vibration that bypassed comms, bypassed sensors, bypassed rational thought, and hammered directly into the primal core of the brainstem. Dread. Absolute paralyzing dread. Crew panicked, evacuation protocols shattered, bodies tumbling into the icy brine. Then through the chaos, through the screaming wind and groaning steel, through the resonant dread, something else emerged. Not a visual entity, not a defined form. Just presence. A shift in the resonant frequency, a localized distortion of gravity, a pull emanating from the breach. Crew, those still conscious, those still clinging to handholds, instinctively reached for their chips, clutched them tight, desperate. And that's when it happened. The chips pulsed. Faint internal luminescence barely visible through gloved hands, and the pull intensified. Not outwards, not away from the rig. Inwards, towards the chips. Towards safety. Hard to define it as safety in that moment of utter annihilation. But something shifted. The rig's slide slowed, momentarily arrested. The resonant dread abated, replaced by a directed frequency. A signal? A beacon? Don't know. Don't think anyone truly understood, but it was anchoring, holding us to something when everything else was collapsing. Evacuation pods malfunctioned. Emergency beacons died. Comms were silent. But the chips pulsed. And some of us were pulled back from the abyss, dragged back onto the tilting platform by something. Unseen, unheard, just felt, rescued, tethered. Don't know the difference anymore. The platform breach was contained, barely. Structural integrity compromised, long-term viability questionable. But some of us survived, clutching useless evacuation manuals, failing emergency beacons, and bioceramic chips pulsing faintly against our frozen skin. That's the only platform breach I've witnessed firsthand, but the echoes resonate still. Some of the long-rotation veterans whisper you can calibrate your chip, fine-tune the resonance, amplify the frequency, toss it into a borehole during a tremor spike, make a request, ask for guidance, and if whatever's down there resonates with your frequency, it might respond, but you don't control the response. You don't dictate the terms. It's a gamble, and the stakes are absolute. Not a gamble I'd recommend to anyone calibrated for survival. What I do know, etched in cryogenic memory, burned into the neural pathways, is this. Don't lose your chip. Keep it against your skin. Wear it always. It's more than just a plastic disc with a serial number. It's your tether, your anchor, your resonance key to whatever ancient consciousness slumbers beneath Crystal 07. And out here, suspended between frozen sky and abyssal depths, sometimes, that's all that separates you from the ice. That's the final log entry I'm scratching out. If you're reading this, you're probably already cycling through Atmoslock, adjusting to the recycled air, the constant hum of the generators, the metallic tang of fear. Maybe you'll never trigger a red alert, never observe dome anomalies, never witness the Leech in a whiteout, never feel the tremors resonate in your bones. Maybe your rotation will be nothing but shift cycles, nutrient paste, and the deceptive beauty of ice blink. If that's your calibration, consider yourself fortunate. But if you do hear the groaning ice beneath you, if you see spectral figures in the dome viewport, if you feel the tremors resonate from the abyssal depths, remember what I've logged. The ice is beautiful, yes, but it's also vast, ancient, and breathing with mysteries that predate human comprehension. Respect the protocols, maintain the seals, calibrate your fear response, and keep your chip resonant. Recycled air and long rotations. Overseer Davies signing off.